It's me, your mother. I worked day and night to send you to school. We don't know you. You are not our mother.
Our mother is right here. She fed and clothed us. Security, take this woman out.
Please, I'm your mother. I made you who you are today. Don't do this to me.
She sacrificed everything for her children, her body, her health, her sleep, even her dignity. She labored through night shifts, hunger, and relentless hardship just to give them a better future. And when God finally blessed them, they turned around and denied the woman who sacrificed everything for them. They introduced their aunt, their mother's younger sister, as their real mother because she was educated and looked like the future they wanted. They watched as security dragged their mother out. And they laughed. But what happened next was something they never expected. But before we begin, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single story. Like this video and comment your country in the comment section right now. Let's go. On that joyful Wednesday night 26 years ago, Mercy and Godwin welcomed their twins, a boy and a girl. The room smelled of fresh linens and the faint sweetness of baby powder, and for a moment, the world seemed perfect. Godwin held her hand tight as the nurse placed the babies in her arms, and she marveled at their tiny fingers curling around hers. They named the boy Johnson and named the girl Blessing. Barely a week later, tragedy struck. Godwin never returned home. On his way back from work, a reckless driver collided with his car. By the time Mercy received the news, the life she had just begun building with him had shattered. Godwin was gone, leaving her alone with the infants, her heart splintered, her arms heavy. Grief, which she expected would be met with sympathy, was met with accusation. Godwin's family appeared after the burial with eyes cold as ice, their judgment sharper than any blade. "You brought this on yourself," the old woman snapped. "My son was a good man, but you killed him." "Mama, please." Mercy's voice cracked on the word. "Please don't do this, Mama. These are his children." "They are bastards," the old woman said. "And you're bad luck. Get out of this house. Go and find somewhere else to carry your misfortune."
"No, Mama."
"Godwin is their father. Please, Mama," she begged. But not a single word of comfort came from her mouth. Not a single ounce of support. Just condemnation. She was sent out of the house with nothing. Godwin's brothers stood along the wall and said nothing. His aunts watched from the doorway. Not one person spoke in her defense. Not one person called his mother back from the edge of that cruelty. They had made their decision before they arrived, and her pain was not going to change it. They threw her out, evicting her from the house as though she were guilty of the accident itself. She gathered what little she had, clothes, baby bottles, blankets, the tiny infants in her arms, and stepped into the unforgiving world outside with loads of debts to pay. Hospital bills stacked up like mountains, creditors began calling, and the harsh reality settled in. She had nothing. Mercy rented a one-room apartment in a worn building in a rough part of the city, with the little money she had left. The room was barely large enough for the mattress she put on the floor for the twins and the couch she claimed for herself. But Mr. Daniel, the older man who owned the building, looked at her situation without judgment and told her to pay what she could for the first month and cover the rest when she was able. She almost wept in his doorway from the simple, uncomplicated kindness of it. The twins were barely a month before Mercy started working. Her fingers were raw from scrubbing floors, her back ached from lifting buckets of water and heavy laundry. She scoured newspapers and bulletin boards for cleaning work, laundry shifts, dishwashing, anything menial, anything she could physically do. She woke before dawn, her body stiff and aching, and carried the twins in her arms to the bus stop. She worked from morning until late, scrubbing homes, mopping floors, washing dishes, hauling laundry. At night, she returned home exhausted, sometimes missing dinner herself, so the babies could eat. Sleep was a luxury she could not afford. Debt collectors came knocking, their voices harsh, their threats sharp. They barked through the cracked door. Each knock made her stomach twist. She would sometimes crouch by the door, whispering prayers, wondering how she could stretch them far enough to cover rent, food, diapers, and other bills. Her health began to crumble. Fevers, Back pains and exhaustion became constant companions, but she never faltered. She sang to them through cracked lips, rocked them through fatigue that threatened to collapse her, whispered that she would make them safe, that she would make them whole. Hunger gnawed at her ribs, her bones ached from endless labor, yet she endured. Each day was an unending battle. Sometimes employers would yell at her, neighbors gossiped, and creditors threatened endlessly. But Mercy learned to endure silently, to bend and not break, to labor and keep moving forward. Every coin she earned, every shift she survived, every sleepless night spent rocking the twins was a brick in the foundation of the life she was determined to build for them. Johnson and Blessing grew quickly and brilliantly. Their teachers used words like exceptional and outstanding and natural ability, and Mercy kept every note, every report card, every scribbled comment in a folder under the couch. On the worst nights, when the bills were impossible and her body was beyond tired, she took out that folder and read through it slowly, and it was enough. One day, Jessica, her younger sister, came visiting. Unlike Mercy, Jessica had built a comfortable life on the other side of the city. She had a steady job at a healthcare company, a proper apartment, neat clothes, and a confidence that made people listen when she spoke. She brought groceries when she came. She remembered the twins' birthdays. She brought small gifts that the twins received with wide-eyed excitement. Mercy was grateful for the help, but each visit left her with a quiet ache she could not explain. Jessica had a habit of offering advice where practical help was needed. She would sit at the small kitchen table, glance around the apartment, and begin pointing out what could be improved, as though Mercy had not already spent years painfully aware of every single limitation. "You need to carry yourself better," Jessica said one evening while Mercy folded laundry. "These children need exposure. If they only see survival, they will think survival is the goal." "They are top of their classes," Mercy replied softly. "That's good. But intelligence without direction doesn't guarantee success, Mercy. You have to think beyond just surviving." Mercy usually shrugged off Jessica's comments, telling herself her sister did not truly understand the weight she carried. Jessica believed she was offering motivation, but her advice often felt like quiet judgment to someone who had spent years simply trying to survive. What Mercy failed to notice was that the twins were always listening. Though still young, they understood more than she realized. They saw the difference between their mother's exhaustion and their aunt's confidence. They absorbed Jessica's words about ambition and presentation, began repeating them, and slowly started turning to her for guidance. Mercy convinced herself it was harmless, that children naturally admired confidence, and that their love for her remained unchanged. She believed her sacrifices were secure in their hearts. Life, however, has a way of testing what we believe is permanent. One Tuesday evening, Mercy stopped at the Kroger on her way home from a cleaning shift, still in her work clothes, her feet aching inside shoes that had seen too many floors. She moved through the checkout line with quiet efficiency, selecting the items she needed for the week. The man in front of her, a man in his 50s, froze at the register, patting his pocket again and again, his face tightening with the expression of someone watching a small disaster unfold in slow motion. His card had declined, and he had a basket of modest groceries, bread, eggs, canned soup, a bag of rice. "Would you like to try again?" the cashier asked, her tone neutral but firm. He nodded and inserted the card again. It declined. A woman behind Mercy snapped, "Get out, old man. We have places to go." Others muttered and shifted impatiently. The air thickened with judgment and humiliation. Mercy watched him for a moment. She recognized that look. She had worn it herself more times than she could count. Without thinking about it too carefully, she stepped forward and told the cashier she would cover it. $20 and some change. The man turned to look at her, and she could see in his face that he was trying to decide whether to accept it or refuse it, and she said simply, "It's fine. Please don't worry about it," and the cashier ran the transaction before he could argue. He thanked her 3 times before she left the store. 3 weeks later, Mercy was cleaning the offices of a logistics company on the east side of Cleveland, one of the buildings on her regular rotation. A man in a well-pressed suit stepped out of an office, nearly walking into her. She stepped back and apologized automatically. "No, no," he said, then paused, studying her face. "Mercy? Elric Moore. The grocery store, 3 weeks ago, when you paid for my groceries." The memory came back slowly. "Oh," she said. "Yes. I remember." The man looked at her and was quiet for a moment. Then he invited her into his office. He told her he was the CEO of the company and that he owned the building. He asked Mercy why a young girl like her was cleaning instead of working in the office. Mercy explained her situation to the man. How she had to drop out of school to finance her younger sister. How she got pregnant and had her twins, then lost her husband. And how her husband's family sent her out of the house and left her on the street. The man listened without interrupting her. He listened like every word mattered, like he understood the weight she carried even if he could never fully feel it. When she finished, she lowered her eyes, unsure if she had overstepped, unsure if anyone ever cared enough to hear the story she had repeated to herself 1,000 times. After hearing her story, he offered her a job at his company. Mercy hesitated. She was used to laboring for every dollar, and the thought of taking a role that might feel unfamiliar, combined with her ongoing responsibilities at home, made her question whether she could accept it. He explained that his offer was not charity, but a repayment of her kindness at a time when he had been struggling himself. In the grocery store, he had been embarrassed, humiliated, and in need, and Mercy had treated him like a human being without expectation. Now, having the means to help, he wanted to offer her the same dignity and opportunity she had given him. Slowly, Mercy realized what this stability could mean for her and the twins. A predictable paycheck, consistent hours, and a work environment that respected her voice and contributions could transform the relentless struggle she had known for years. It was not a solution to all her problems, but it was a rare opportunity, a small crack of light in a life that had been largely defined by shadow and exhaustion. She accepted with the understanding that while the path ahead would still demand perseverance, she could finally take a breath, knowing the foundation she had built for her children could now be supported by something steady and dependable. Mercy shared the news with her children when she got home. They celebrated and hugged their mother. Mercy resumed work the following Monday as an office assistant. Her paycheck arrived early. She kept her weekend cleaning jobs to build the tuition fund she had been maintaining since the twins started secondary school, but for the first time in years she could breathe and sleep well. But the happiness only lasted for a while. 5 years after she started working, Mercy got a call that Blessing had collapsed at school. What seemed like a routine infection quickly turned serious, requiring specialists, tests, and a hospital stay that stretched from 3 days into 2 weeks. Before Blessing was fully discharged, Johnson fell ill with the same condition. Mercy couldn't go to work for 2 weeks. There was no one to care for the twins. When she returned, her position had already been filled, and she was accused of neglect despite informing her boss. Eventually, she was told she lacked the necessary qualifications and was laid off. Every call to Elric went unanswered. With no other options, she returned to her cleaning jobs. The work was exhausting, but she held her head high. The twins recovered and returned to school. Jessica visited often, but her comments grew increasingly critical, blaming Mercy for losing the job and pointing out her lack of qualifications, as if it were her fault. Years later, Blessing and Johnson graduated from secondary school at the top of their class. Jessica made sure her voice was always the loudest when discussing university options, guiding the twins on programs, scholarships, and the best pathways for their careers. Mercy had opinions. She had spent years researching scholarships. She had ideas about programs, about costs, about which schools had the strongest financial aid packages for students in their situation. But Jessica had connections. Aunt Jessica says Northwestern has a better pre-law program than Ohio State, Blessing announced one evening at dinner. I was actually looking at Ohio State's scholarship structure, Mercy said carefully. The funding package they offer could cover almost. Johnson looked up from his phone and said, almost kindly, Aunt Jessica already mapped out a better route. She's done this before, Mom. Don't stress yourself. The words stung at times, but Mercy told herself it was natural for them to gravitate towards someone who seemed confident and capable. It didn't mean they loved her less. Jessica attended every planning session, made calls, wrote recommendation letters, coached personal statements, and connected the twins with opportunities. Her guidance was invaluable, and the twins responded gratefully, trusting her judgment completely. When the acceptance letters came, the apartment was filled with screaming and celebration. Blessing into a university in Boston, Johnson into one in Chicago, both on partial scholarships. It was everything Mercy had worked toward since the night she first brought them home to a one-room apartment and whispered promises into their sleeping faces. Mercy sold her car, her television, furniture, and even jewelry, working extra cleaning shifts to ensure the twins could attend comfortably. She spared nothing, knowing their future was worth every sacrifice. On the mornings they left, Johnson reminded her that Aunt Jessica had sent care packages, and Blessing kissed her cheek, telling her to call Jessica if she needed anything. Mercy watched them go, feeling a mix of pride and emptiness. She didn't cry from sadness. She cried because she had done what had once seemed impossible. When she returned to her apartment, it was empty. She was greeted by the silence and emptiness of a house, but she was fulfilled she had sent her kids to university. What she did not yet know was that the world her children were stepping into had no room in it for her. The first few weeks after they left were the best weeks Mercy had known in years. They called every day, their voices bright and breathless. They talked about their roommates, their professors, the dining hall food that was nothing like home cooking. They laughed about new friends, complained about weather. Mercy adjusted her shifts around their schedules. She kept her phone charged and closed at all times. Then the calls began to thin. They stopped calling at the regular times again. They stopped calling daily. When she called, the phone rang out or she received a short text, "In class, we'll call later," and later rarely came. When they did speak, the conversations were shorter, flatter. The easy warmth of those first weeks replaced by something more perfunctory. She could hear in their voices that they were elsewhere even when they were on the phone with her. She told herself it was the workload. University was demanding. She remembered how exhausted they looked during exams in secondary school. What she did not know was that Jessica had already visited both campuses. Jessica took her time touring their campuses with her arm around her niece's shoulders like a proud mother. She called them regularly, sent advice about course selections and networking events, and how to present themselves professionally. She wired money for things she called investments in their future: a better laptop for Blessing, a professional wardrobe for Johnson's internship interviews. The twins responded to all of it with the enthusiasm they had stopped directing toward their mother. Mercy found out about the campus visits through a photo Blessing posted online. Jessica and Blessing laughing outside the university library, Jessica's arm around her daughter's shoulder, the caption reading, "My biggest supporter." Mercy stared at the photo for a long time. Then she put her phone down and went to get ready for her morning shift. She never mentioned the photo. She never asked why she had not been told. Instead, she kept working, kept sending what she could at the end of each month, consistently. Years passed and the pattern continued. The distance settled into something almost permanent. When the twins graduated, they did not tell Mercy. She saw the photos on Jessica's Facebook page, caps in the air, wide smiles, and the caption, "Proud Mother." Mercy sat with her phone in her hand and read those two words over and over. Proud Mother. She set the phone down. She picked it up again. She called Blessing. It rang out. She called Johnson. It rang out. She sent a message to both of them. Simple, careful, just "Congratulations, my children. I am so proud of you," and watched the ticks beneath the message stay gray for 3 days. They had seen it. She knew they had seen it. Then she called Jessica. "Be patient with them," Jessica said, her voice smooth and unbothered. "They're busy. It's a big transition. I'll talk to them. I'll make sure they call you." "Jessica, it has been months." "Mercy. I said I will handle it. Trust me." She trusted her. She waited. But the call never came. A week later, she tried Jessica again. The phone rang out. She tried the following day. Same result. She sent a message. No response. Jessica, the same sister who had promised to bridge the gap, had quietly joined the silence. For 1 year, Mercy didn't hear from her children or Jessica. Then one afternoon she was sitting in her room when her neighbor Clara burst through the door, breathless and bright-eyed with the excitement of someone carrying news they could not contain. "Why didn't you tell us your children are back? Why didn't you tell us they've made it big?" Clara's voice filled the small room. "Your children are back and throwing a big party, and you didn't say a word to any of us?" Mercy looked at her neighbor. The words landed differently than Clara intended them to. Not as celebration. Not as shared joy. They landed the way cold water does when you are not expecting it, sharp, sudden, and leaving you unable to pretend you did not feel it. Her children were back in Cleveland. They had not called. Mercy called Blessing. She called Johnson, but it went to voicemail. She sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the wall for a long moment, the phone still warm in her hand, and thought about what to do. She could sit in her quiet apartment the way she had been sitting in it for a year, waiting for a call that never came, shrinking herself down to fit inside a silence her children had built around her. Mercy thought about it what to do. Then she decided she would attend the ceremony. Regardless of what they did, they were still her children and she had missed them. Mercy arrived at Briarwood Estate 2 hours later. She stood at the entrance for a moment and took it all in. Cars lined the driveway, each one worth more than she had earned in years. Guests moved through the entrance in evening gowns and tailored suits, laughing easily, unbothered, the way people move when life has never required them to hurry. Lights hung between trees. Music drifted from somewhere inside. The whole estate glittered like something from a world she had only ever watched from the outside. She straightened her dress and walked in. She had barely stepped through the entrance when she saw them. Blessing and Johnson stood a few feet away, surrounded by guests in suits, laughing. Blessing wore a sleeveless red gown that fell to the floor in clean, elegant lines, her wig styled to perfection, diamond earrings catching the light every time she turned. Johnson stood beside her in a fitted black tuxedo, his shoes polished to a mirror finish, a gold watch on his wrist that caught the chandelier light when he gestured. They looked extraordinary. Not just wealthy, transformed, polished in a way that went beyond clothing or money, carrying themselves with the effortless confidence of people who had arrived exactly where they intended to arrive and had no intention of ever leaving. Mercy stopped walking. Her eyes filled with tears before she could stop them, and she did not try to stop them, because these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of something she could not fully name, the overwhelming, chest-splitting recognition that the two tiny faces she had whispered promises to in a one-room apartment had become this. She had done that. Whatever else had happened, she had done that. She moved toward them slowly, steadily, the way you approach something precious that you are afraid to startle. "Blessing," she called softly. Blessing turned. For one fraction of a second, something crossed her daughter's face. Something that looked, just briefly, like recognition. Like the girl who used to fall asleep in her mother's arms on a second-hand couch. Then it was gone, replaced by something smooth and cold and practiced. "I'm sorry," Blessing said clearly, loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear. "Do I know you?" Mercy felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "It's me. It's me, your mother, Blessing." Johnson turned now. His eyes found hers and held them, not with confusion, but with something sharper. Something deliberate. "Johnson." His name came out of her like a wound. "It is me. It is your mother." She stepped forward and reached for Blessing's arm. Blessing yanked back so sharply that Mercy lost her footing and went down hard, hitting the marble floor with a force that drew a collective gasp from the crowd around them. Pain shot through her hip and her palm. She looked up from the floor at the faces of 200 strangers staring down at her, and beyond them, at her children, who did not move to help her. She pushed herself up, her palms stinging, her dress creased, her dignity held together by nothing but 26 years of practice. "I am your mother," she said, her voice breaking open with every word.
I
"I
worked day
cleaned
and night to send you
offices.
to school.
I cleaned toilets.
It's
I
me, your
sold my
mother.
clothes. I sold
worked
my
day
car
and night to
and
send you to
everything I
school.
owned so you could go to school and
It's
stand in
me,
this
your
room
mother.
tonight.
I
Johnson's
worked
jaw
day and
tightened.
night to send you
He
to
stepped
school.
back and extended his arm toward Jessica, who moved forward in her gold gown like she had been waiting in the wings for exactly this cue. "This," Johnson said, his voice warm again, all the coldness suddenly gone, "is our mother. The woman who raised us. The woman who sacrificed everything for us." Blessing stepped to Jessica's other side and took her hand. "She is the one who was always there," Blessing said to the room. "Always in our corner. Always making sure we had what we needed." The applause rose immediately, generous and certain. Jessica pressed a hand to her chest and dabbed at her eyes with the corner of her gown, performing grief at a precision that took years to perfect. Mercy stood a few feet away, on the same floor, in the same room, invisible. "Please," Mercy
Please, I'm your
whispered.
mother.
"Security."
I made you who you
Johnson's
are today.
voice
Don't
was
do
flat
this to
and
me.
final. "Get this woman out of
Please,
this
I'm your
place.
mother.
We don't know
I made
her.
you who you are
She
today.
wants to
Don't do
reap where
this
she
to
did not
me.
sow." The guards grabbed Mercy immediately and dragged her out of the hall. The laughter resumed immediately, and Jessica stood between Blessing and Johnson with their arms around her shoulders while 200 people applauded a lie told in a gold dress. Mercy made it home somehow. She did not remember the taxi ride, only the silence when the door of her apartment closed behind her. The same bare walls that had once felt like sacrifice now felt like accusation. For days, she did not leave her bed. The scene replayed relentlessly. The marble floor, the applause, Johnson's voice calling another woman mother. At first, she cried. Then even that stopped. By the end of the week, Mercy had developed a fever that would not break.
She stopped eating.
She lost weight she could not afford to lose. Clara took one look at her one morning and called a cab without asking permission and took her to the hospital. The doctors admitted her for dehydration and exhaustion, and what one of them gently described as a significant depressive episode. Clara tried every number she could find. She called Blessing and Johnson's number. It said the line was unavailable. She found Jessica's number in Mercy's phone and called it 3 times over 2 days. But she didn't answer. Mercy spent weeks in the hospital, and Clara visited every day. Meanwhile, while Mercy was fighting her way back to health, Jessica tightened her hold on the twins' lives. With their rising salaries and growing professional networks, Blessing and Johnson began earning more than they had ever imagined. Jessica positioned herself as their financial guide. She advised aggressive investments, overseas real estate, venture capital placements, foreign currency accounts. She spoke confidently about leverage and expansion, about multiplying wealth rather than merely preserving it. They trusted her and did everything she advised. She introduced them to a high-return fund, managed by associates she described as seasoned global investors. The returns, at first, appeared impressive. Statements showed steady growth. They were encouraged, they invested more, then borrowed to invest further. Jessica assured them it was strategic. Months later, the fund began to falter. Payments were delayed. Reports became vague. Then regulators announced investigations into fraudulent financial activity tied to offshore accounts. Their names surfaced in compliance reviews at their workplaces. Questions were asked. Audits followed. The fund collapsed entirely. By the time they understood the scale of the deception, Jessica had already transferred substantial amounts under management and advisory fees. The accounts were drained. Then she resigned from her position quietly, liquidated all her assets, and disappeared. She changed her phone numbers. Emails bounced. The twins were left facing bankruptcy, reputational damage, and internal investigations at work. Promotions evaporated. Contracts were reconsidered. The same society that had celebrated them now distanced itself carefully. For the first time, they understood what it meant to stand alone in a room full of judgment. Meanwhile, far from the noise of scandal, Mercy had regained her health and had returned to work. She worked for 5 hours each day and returned home. She saw the news about Blessing and Johnson on the news and felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not grief. Just the quiet of a woman who had already buried everything there was to lose. 2 weeks after Johnson and Blessing's fall, Mercy received a call from Elric Moore. Elric had returned to Cleveland after years away with his family. During a routine company restructuring of his firm, a long-overlooked equity allocation surfaced. Years earlier, when he had hired Mercy as an office assistant, he had included her in a minor employee share program as a gesture of long-term security. Mercy had signed paperwork she barely understood, assuming it was standard employment documentation. She had never imagined it mattered. Following a merger and acquisition, those modest shares had multiplied over the years. She received a letter by certified mail. She was told she has $200 million. At first, Mercy thought it was a mistake. Then lawyers confirmed it. The equity had vested fully during the company's expansion overseas. For a long time, she sat at her small kitchen table and stared at the numbers. She did not scream. She did not do anything. She just breathed. Mercy reinvested a large part of the money. She paid all her debt. She bought a small house, not a mansion, not an estate, just a warm, sunlit house in a peaceful neighborhood. She enrolled in business administration courses at a local university, determined to understand the language of contracts and capital that had once excluded her. She hired reputable advisors. She invested conservatively and wisely. She founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting struggling single mothers. The foundation provided temporary housing assistance, legal aid, childcare grants, and small business microloans. It offered what she had once needed most: dignity without humiliation. Her names appeared in magazines, television, and in rooms she never thought she could enter as a strategist. A woman who had endured and risen without bitterness. Johnson and Blessing, still drowning in debts and different court cases, heard of who their mother had become and began calling her. The text messages were uncountable. Mercy did not block their number. Neither did she answer their calls. One sunny afternoon, Mercy was in her compound, enjoying the cool breeze when the gateman approached her, saying she had visitors. Mercy looked up from her chair when the gateman appeared at the edge of the compound. "Ma, you have visitors," he said quietly. "A man and a woman. They say they are your children." Mercy was still for a moment. The cool breeze moved through the compound the way it always did in the late afternoon, unhurried and indifferent to human affairs. She considered it for a moment, and then she looked back at the gateman and said calmly, "Let them in." Blessing and Johnson walked through the gate, looking like people who had survived something and were not yet sure what to do with the survival. The polish was gone. The effortless confidence she had watched from across a glittering ballroom had been replaced by something quieter and considerably more fragile. Blessing had lost weight. Her handbag, once designer and loud, looked like it had survived too many anxious commutes. Johnson's eyes carried the particular heaviness of a man who had not slept properly in months. They were dressed neatly but simply, and they walked toward their mother with the careful steps of people who understood, perhaps for the first time, that they were not owed a welcome. For a moment no one spoke. "Mum," Blessing's voice cracked on the word. It sounded unfamiliar in her mouth. Mercy closed her book carefully and placed it on the table beside her.
"We're sorry. We're so sorry.
We lost everything. We have nothing. The courts, the lawyers, the investigations, we don't know what to do anymore. We need you. Please." Johnson said nothing for a moment. Then he sat down on the ground, right there in the compound, and put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. Johnson swallowed. "We made mistakes." Mercy watched them both. She studied them without anger. Without softness either. Just clarity. "We trusted the wrong person," Johnson continued quickly. "The investments, the lawsuits, everything collapsed. We're fighting cases in 2 countries. We don't have anything again. We thought we were building wealth, but if you could just borrow us some money," Blessing said quickly. "You are still our mother. You still love us, right? You don't want us dead, do you?" Her voice that felt pitiful when she entered had now turned threatening. Mercy sat quietly for a long time. When she finally looked at them again, she allowed the silence to sit between them for a long time before she spoke. "Do you remember Briarwood Estate?" she asked. Both of them went still. "I remember the marble floor. I remember calling your names. I remember being dragged out while strangers applauded a lie. Her voice remained calm, but each word landed with surgical precision. That day, something happened. Silence pressed against them. My children died the day you buried me while I was alive. Don't talk like that, Mum, Johnson said. We've apologized already. You should listen to us now. Mercy thought about everything she had been through again. She looked at the ungrateful children who she thought had come to apologize but hadn't changed, but still feel entitled to whatever they thought they deserve. Security, she called. 2 men appeared immediately. Escort them out of my house. And don't ever open my gates for them. They are strangers that I don't know.
No, Mum.
They said at once. Please, we are really sorry. They called, but the security didn't give them the chance. Mercy went back inside and sat down in her sitting room. She did not feel victorious. She did not feel sad. She felt the particular quietness of a woman who had finally set down something she had been carrying for a very long time. For years, she had mistaken endurance for love. She had believed that to be a mother meant to forgive endlessly, to sacrifice without limit, to open the door no matter how many times it was slammed in her face. But love without respect is slow poison. She had swallowed enough of it. She walked back to her chair and sat down. The sun filtered gently through the trees, touching her face with warmth that felt earned. She thought about the girl she used to be, the young mother who cleaned offices at dawn and sold her jewelry to pay school fees. That woman had loved deeply, fiercely, without calculation. But that woman had also allowed herself to be erased. Her children had not come back, transformed. They had come back desperate. Transformation accepts responsibility. They had apologized, yes. But apology without humility is just strategy. Mercy picked up her book again, but instead of reading, she closed her eyes briefly. She did not wish them destruction. She did not pray for their suffering. She simply released herself from the burden of rescuing adults who had once publicly denied her existence. That was not revenge. That was freedom. Across town, Blessing and Johnson would have to face the courts. They would have to rebuild their names from scratch. They would have to sit in waiting rooms and explain their choices to lawyers who charged by the hour. They would have to confront the uncomfortable truth that the woman they replaced had been the only one who loved them without profit. And perhaps, in time, that realization would teach them what privilege never did. Mercy inhaled deeply. Peace feels different when it is protected. And perhaps, in time, that realization would teach them what privilege never did. Mercy inhaled deeply. Peace feels different when it is protected. Moral of the story. Never be ashamed of the hands that built you. The foundation you disrespect today may be the only one strong enough to hold you tomorrow. Apology is not entitlement. Saying sorry does not obligate someone to restore what you broke. Pride can elevate you quickly, but humility is what sustains you. Rejection is painful, but sometimes it is the doorway to dignity. Gratitude preserves relationships. Entitlement destroys them. If this story touched you, take a moment today to appreciate the people who sacrificed for you.
Call them.
Thank them. Honor them while you still can. And if you are the one who has been rejected after giving your all, remember this. You are not obligated to bleed twice for the same wound. Choose dignity. Choose boundaries.
Choose peace.
Remember to like and share this post and comment where you're watching from. Thanks for watching.